Hi, welcome to this edition of County Happenings, where we talk with the county mayor about what's going on in the county. And right now, he's knee-deep in budget.
This time of year, for about 60 days, it's turning over every rock looking for an extra dollar or a penny.
It's not a fun time, is it?
Well, it's a process. You're in the last 60 days, but you actually start the budget process right after you approved the budget last year. So somewhere in July and August, we kind of coast, be sure we've got things in place, but shortly in September and October, we start the budget processes again. It's a growing county.
Yes, it is. You look all around and find something's going up somewhere.
I didn't talk to you about this before we went on air, but last year we had about 2,500 building permits. Now, those aren't commercial. Those are just residential. And that number has been pretty consistent. What was interesting about that, last year's numbers in the 2,500 building permits, a third of them came from Franklin. So about 800 of them came from Franklin, give or take a few. But for the first time in a long time, Nolensville had more than Spring Hill.
Oh, my Lord.
And so,
really? So
we're beginning to see a new, faster growing city in Nolensville, and then of course Spring Hill's still having phenomenal growth, and a lot of it is timing when you get your permits in. But 2018, Nolensville was more aggressive in their residential growth than Spring Hill, which was interesting.
That's amazing.
Now overall, we might have been off, 3 to 5%, but what I hear all the time, and I'm try to keep my ears to it, is availability of lots, availability of land. But it's still growing. And census is here upon us. 2020, we have to have by Congress, we have to have a number. So Joe Horn is in charge of that for the countywide, and the census people bring or assign a person to cover this area. But it's so critical. That's in the next 6 months, you'll begin to hear more and more conversation about that all of us report. I know there's some confidentiality that some people feel that they don't want big government knowing about it, but the census is all about how they disperse the dollars from Washington to the different cities and counties, and it just means so much to receive they're your federal dollars, and so if we don't do it correctly, it just goes to some other area.
Right, and it's so important that some of the cities in the county do a special census midway through, just because they've grown so much and they want to recoup
Franklin, Brentwood both have done a couple of census. The last census we had was in 2010, and we had about 183,000 people, and Franklin and Brentwood both have done special census during the Spring Hill too, come think of it. But for cities, it's a little over, it's about $118, I think, per person that increases. So if you have 5,000 people that increase in your city, and it's to say $100, that's a lot of money that's being fed into the city coffers that gets redistributed from feds and Nashville. Counties are not allowed to do a recensus take. It's just has to be, but done every 10 years. But there is no new consideration. We've tried to get some legislation to change that because fast-growing counties, although our county was about, when I say county, the unincorporated part of our county, it was about 15% of those building permits. So if you had 2,500, you're looking at, we had somewhere around 350 to 370.
That's still pretty high for the county.
It is, and it's just been steady.
So that means the rural areas are starting to get built up.
They are, and you're seeing more of that around the Paytonsville area down there. Once you go through, once you go through the interchange of Lewisburg Pike, going on across Paytonsville Road, there's quite a bit of development there. There's some out towards the College Grove, Triune, Arrington area. But for the most part, the growth occurs where there's public utilities.
Yeah.
And sewer is not available in a lot of those areas, so they have to be on septic tank or they have to be on some other conventional
Yeah,
system.
and that means that they have to buy larger lots.
Absolutely.
And that, I'm not sure people today are that scared of being on, people, it's not the septic tank, it's the fact that you have to have a larger lot to do it.
Yeah, it's
In a lot of those areas, there's not water as well.
correct. Most of our area is served by some form of water. One of our utility companies, in fact, when I finish this TV show today, I'll have a new utility, I'll have one of the existing utility companies come in. I have to sign off on their new commissioner that they have picked or they voted in. And once I sign it, it goes on to Nashville. But most of our county is serviced by water. Now, there's still a lot of people drawing water from wells and springs. And a lot of that is by choice because there's not Harpeth Utility or Franklin Utility or College Grove, Nolensville, any of these utility companies. They all have a geographic area in which they provide water. Of course, they have to build it in a way that it doesn't hurt the ratepayers.
Right.
Also, so, and none of them are in the sewer business. All of them are just want to do the water, and we're glad they do.
Yeah, it's come out my way. It hasn't come out all the way.
Are you on well?
We're still on well. Everybody on our road is still on well. But we're fortunate that we have a good well.
Yeah. A lot of people would know what that means.
Yeah.
That water being pumped up out of the ground has to be so many pounds per square inch. And if you don't have enough water flow, or that, I mean, you have to have a pump to draw it out, but you got to have a certain amount of water
In order to draw it out.
to draw it out.
And some of these dry years, there's been folks around the area whose wells went dry, and then they have to have water brought in.
That's
which-
not cheap.
That's not cheap at all, no. And then you're really into conserving and, watching what you're doing.
Well, I'm in the unincorporated area, but Franklin services our water. Now, I don't have sewer, I have septic. But I kind of like that. And my monthly bill, my water bill's, $20, $25. My septic bill is $0.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
That's nice. We don't even have either, once you make that initial investment in the
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
it's done.
Well, that's the way that I was raised as a boy. We had a well and had a septic tank, and now you had to baby that well, and the septic system. There's a lot of things you can't do, but we won't spend a whole show talking about that. But people that are on septic tanks do enjoy a different cost than those that are on public utilities.
Right.
Although public utilities is probably a long term, they don't have to worry about it. Just pay your monthly bills and go on about your business.
Right. There's give and take for
Yes,
both
there
of them.
is.
There's a little independence here, but yet there's knowledge that you don't have to deal with
right.
with any problems or anything.
But anyway,
But,
through our budget, we were talking about that. We will be through in a couple of weeks. We're going to hear the school budget. Well, that's the lion's share of the budget.
Yeah. It used to be like 60%, so it's up to 70, isn't it?
So 63% of the total budget is about operational. And then there's about 8 to 9% that's for debt, because the county commission has to pay the debt of the schools. So it's about 72 total percent. And so we run the rest of government on the 28 to 30%.
So that means really efficient.
It is efficient. There's always room for improvements. There's always ways you can cut a few here and there. But we had an earlier show today talking about the sheriff, talking to the sheriff. And Dusty Rhodes is our sheriff, and he was talking about when he first came to work under Fleming Williams, there was about 20-some-odd people. We have over 360 law enforcement people just up underneath the sheriff's department now. Different divisions, SROs.
SRO's taking a big chunk of that.
They're clearly a third of your budget now, and because we got 48 schools.
Yeah. You need one for each school, and then you need rotators for people that need to take time off or sick or vacation.
Well, high schools we have 2.
That's true.
If they're over 1,500, they get 2, and then you have to have rotators, and you have to have people for vacation. Now, most of those men and women serve as our student resource officers, SROs. They work the same schedule as the school personnel, but their boss is the sheriff.
Right, and then, and when they're not at school, like oftentimes they don't have time off, they're doing something
They're
for the
doing
sheriff's
something else.
department.
Now, they get their vacation.
Yeah,
And there's a real strong desire of, in fact, Dusty, the sheriff said this morning in our interview, it's getting harder and harder to find men and women that want to serve. But in the area of SROs, there seems to be a different mindset. People want to serve in that capacity, to be around those children and teachers and really make a difference. Now, I still think where the rubber meets the road is out there on the patrol, because you're dealing with everything and anything all day long or all night long.
yeah, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's it. But the community that's growing, if we're at 226,000 people, we'll probably be over 230 once the census completed. We'll be north of that number. In looking at budgets, we need to do something about how we're going to enlarge our juvenile area, our juvenile services, juvenile court, the different functions that we have there.
Yes, because along with this growth, a lot of great things happen, but you also get trouble.
You do. Everything's proportional. We, certainly everyone in society now knows that drugs are so prevalent in our communities. I think Williamson County does as good a job. Our city, our police chief and their operation, our 6 cities, our county sheriff, they do work together. But the drugs that are in our community, they're not exclusive of any boundaries. You can be tall or short, fat or skinny, rich or poor, and drugs are prevalent in our community. And so that's something Dusty has to deal with. Right. We have a higher population of just females in our jails. When that jail was built 30 years ago, it wasn't built for a lot of, I think he said we have about 40 quads, 40 units that we can use, female pods, and we'll have 50 and 60 almost all the time. So you have to move people. You cannot have the males and the females together.
Oh, no.
It's just, you've got to figure out a way to separate that.
No, and juvenile services, they're still in the sheriff's department.
The juvenile court area and what Judge Guffey and her staff, Brenda Hayden and her staff do, they're all housed. We were the last facility that was built that you could have juvenile and adult population in the same building. Now, they do not commingle.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But they're in the same building, and so we're going to have to build, or when we build, which will be in the next couple of 2 or 3 years, a new juvenile system. I'll just use that word. Facility that houses. We have to separate them. They just don't. The state will not allow you anymore to build a facility, which would be cheaper, but they want the juveniles and the adult population separated.
Well, with the growth in different kinds of crime now that's coming into the county, it's almost dangerous to have them together.
Well, it's not almost, it is, and we just don't need the adults and the juveniles. So oftentimes the young people that are over there, they just made a bad choice. They don't need to be around hardened criminals that they continue to make bad choices or they're there. So we don't need them learning from the skilled masters, the juveniles. We need to try to train and educate and correct, and the court system does a good job. And there are many, many reasons people are in juvenile court: divorces, custodial, issues.
It's not all issues about somebody doing something wrong. There's issues about family
truancy.
things.
Yeah. I mean, you and I grew up in an era, that
you had the truant officer.
You have a truant officer, and today the schools, when your son or daughter is not at school, I mean, immediately, as soon as that bell rings to start school, that information has been fed into a computer and it's immediately fed out. They're calling your house or your number. Where is Billy or Susie? I always felt bad about Billy and Susie. We always picked on them. But anyway, that's an area that we have to concentrate.
What about schools?
48 schools currently, 2 under construction, 1 on Goosey Hill, 1 on Henpeck Lane. Goosey Hill will be an elementary, and Henpeck will be a true middle school. Excuse me, allergies. Both of those schools are to be open in 2020, so that'll put us to 50 schools, Williamson County Public Schools. They being the school system, they're looking for 2 additional sites to build schools, 1 in the Arrington Triune community to handle some of the growth that's occurring on the, I guess that would be the east side of Nolensville, coming down Nolensville Road and the College Grove area. There was a time College Grove, I think it had 200 children in the element. Not anymore. They're full.
Wow.
Just so much growth occurring, and of course those corridors inside the cities like Carruthers that goes from the back, that goes down by Walker Chevrolet, going down Carruthers, going down to the Ag Center. There's nothing but houses upon houses upon houses, and of course all points in between. It's not just Franklin, but there's all points in between. Spring Hill, Thompson Station. We opened a school over in Thompson Station. I believe it was 2 years ago. It might have been 3. Is full, completely full.
So
you would say, well, we're not building them large enough. Well, we're building them what the capacity allows.
Yeah, and it gets to a point with a school where it's too large, and you just can't handle that many kids in one area.
Well, and if we had 2,500 building permits in 2018, we had at least that in 2017. We had at least that in 2016. So right off the bat, you're talking about 7,500 to 10,000 new building permits. Now those homes, for the most part, the ones in 17 and 16, they're finished and people are living in them. Not every house has a child, but in Williamson County, we get a lot of children moving into our community.
Not everyone has one, but most do.
Most do. And we're at 41,000 children, in which just a few years ago we were 35, 36. So we do get a lot. We get a lot of people move into apartments that influence. They're outside the Franklin Special School Districts. They wind up in the county school system.
Yeah, that's the growth is a big thing. We've had a change in emergency management.
We did. A longtime friend of mine and been here, actually cut his teeth in the fire service business when he was a teenager, grew up around here, is Mac Purdy. Went away to the military, National Guard, went to Vanderbilt. I always held that against him. But came and worked for a long time at TEMA, Tennessee Emergency Management, and had the opportunity several years ago to come back and be the director of emergency management.
And he was very integral in reshaping emergency management.
Him, Bill Jordan, Bill Jorgensen, now Steve Martini, who's in charge of all of our 911 center and telecommunication, had just done a wonderful job. Mac had the opportunity to, like so many people that work around here, and he's still a fairly young man. He's not getting old and gray-headed like I am.
He's got that young face.
He does. He'll be 50 and still have the young face. But Max did a wonderful job with us. But he had the opportunity to go to work in the private sector, doing basically what he's doing. More and more people are getting into emergency management services, training, consulting from the private side, because for the most part,
You can make more money.
to make more money. But there's another reason. Most communities do not have the resources to be able to provide training, the equipment, et cetera, for unprotected communities. Now, when you're in Franklin City, Brentwood, any of your cities, the big part of their budget goes for public safety. I know Franklin's is there's a large percent of their money goes for the operation of their police and for their fire, because those are 24 375 operations, and it requires a lot of men and women to run those. Counties operate a lot different. We don't have paid men and women serving in those unincorporated area. They're run by volunteers. So the county provides the equipment, the building, in most cases, for those facilities out there. Well, Mac helped work in that area. He also was in charge. The state law says that during a national disaster, or national or state or local disaster, that your emergency management director reports directly to me, and then we communicate with the governor or the governor's staff at TEMIA. And so that's an important role, and it's important to understand how all that works. Anyway, he took a job for a company, and we'll miss him, and I know he's stayed in communications with a lot of our people, but we interviewed. There were a lot of candidates because we're known in the South for our operation and our commitment to funding for public safety. That's just like being in the sheriff's office as far as I'm concerned. Our SROs are housed out of there in our building. Our 911 centers under Steve Martini, he's up to 60 people now. We've consolidated Franklin and Spring Hill. All of that's been dispatched right out of there. The sheriff doesn't do that anymore. So Mac's position, emergency management director, is now, we have offered the job, and he has accepted to come to the work at the end of this month. Todd Horton. Todd's long-term name in Williamson County, worked for the Franklin Fire. I think he wanted a little change of pace. He'd been with them 25 or 30 years, so here was an opportunity for him to go from the fire service and get out more in the rural area, but also be an emergency management director. He'll do an outstanding job. We had candidates from Baltimore, Atlanta, from the West Coast, central part of the United States that came in, or we interviewed them through Skype or through one of the mechanisms we got, so we don't have to pay them all the time. But we had two that flew in on their own nickel. They wanted to come in and make that presence and then look at the area too. And but ultimately that decision was made to go with Todd, and I'm looking forward to working with him.
Yeah, and the nice thing about having somebody like Todd is he knows he knows the county, he knows the area, and
he knows the people.
He knows the people.
And he's a very astute. I mean, he's the academic side of it. He's going to study and find the best ways to get things done. But the world of public safety is constantly changing and evolving and having to be brought up into the 21st, 27th.
Yeah.
Steve Martini, we were telling him, we now have equipment that under homeowners associations and for other organizations, they go directly into our system. We save about 40 to 60 seconds on the front end. So if under that commercial that help, I've fallen, I can't get up, I won't mention the name. So that would normally go to their office, and dispatch would call us. Now they can go directly into their system, and it's directly fed to us.
Wow.
We can find about 40 seconds to 60 seconds on the front. Well, that makes a difference in someone that's elderly.
Well, somebody's having a heart attack or something like that.
Or a child.
Yeah, or a child.
Or a car wreck. I mean, these are all the latest and greatest technology. We spent several dollars recently in the last 2 or 3 years getting our systems. We now have the ability on your phone to pinpoint exactly where you are on a cell phone. Where it used to be, you had to come off from what they call a triangle and get 3 of the towers, and you get within a certain area. We now can do that right off your phone, just like Lyft and Uber and some of those companies can find you. So some of that technology is now available in the public safety world, and it's so comforting to be able to know that, for an example, if someone was in a hostile situation, if they could just text us, if they can just do a 911 and without going to some app, it has to be built into your phone. All the phones now that are being produced will have that technology. that we can pinpoint exactly where you are off from that phone.
Because a lot of times they can't call 911.
That's right.
You know, they're in a position where they need help, but how do you, that's such an awesome thing.
Well, and we're getting to the next stage. I know we're running out of time, but we're getting to the next stage that texting is the preferred method of communication. And so the technology that we have now, we're still working out some of those bugs, but the technology is that, let's say you were been abducted, you were sitting in a place eating. If we can just pinpoint your text through that phone, we never have to talk to you. Wow. I mean, if you just, we had an example, somebody wrote in help, called in help and hung up, we could find that phone immediately. And we were able to dispatch people right here in Franklin and to get the law enforcement to see what was really going on. And we never know a lot of the end stories. We only know the front end of it. But texting is a way for a lot of the young people that are abducted or if they can just text, then you can pinpoint that phone if it comes back. It's amazing. It's incredible.
Amazing, yeah.
It does cost money.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing's free. Nothing's
No.
cheap.
And then training.
And training and keeping up with all that. But that's the challenges of a growing community that you don't, I know you know about it, but the general public just doesn't think about it. Hopefully none of us will ever have to use that technology, but there are many people that do.
If you ever need it, it's there.
It is there.
Yeah. And just on a, you know, another note, one of our cities in the community celebrating an anniversary. They're 50 years old.
Brentwood? Well, the parade is actually tomorrow. This show will air.
Yeah, they're kind of kicking it off with a parade, and then they're going to have an event in August, and then in October they're having another event. So they're kind of spreading it out over the year and doing a few things. But
trivia question. Have we got time for me to ask you a trivia? You got 1 minute? Trivia question, see if you know this. There was a great Western singer that lived in Brentwood, went on to Hollywood.
Not Eddie Arnold.
Come on.
Was it? No.
He wrote, he wore the white hat, and Gene Autry.
I was just going to say Gene Autry. Oh my, I did not know he was from Brentwood.
And he was involved in the first water. You talk about water district.
You're right. Eddie Arnold, Gene Autry, and somebody else was telling, John Oden was telling me about that. And when he said Gene Autry, I started singing some of his songs.
Eddie Arnold, and I mean, all those people
with
were
Meadow Lake.
Yes, and they were in those early days. And, of course, they're all deceased. But when you say 50 years, they were probably in their 30s and 40s at that time.
And, well, Brentwood didn't incorporate until 1969. So that was before that. Yeah. Wow. Well, congratulations.
I'm proud for Brentwood. They're wonderful people.
Yeah.
Good leadership up there.
Well, thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us at County Happenings. We'll see you next time.